You're invited. Join Dane County Humane Society for Toto's Gala on Friday, March 14th at Monona Terrace. Enjoy a night of cocktails, dinner, dancing, and, best of all, adorable animal greeters. Bid on incredible items in their silent auction and discover how the dreams we dare to dream for animals come true. Your support helps DCHS provide life-saving care for animals in need. Don't miss this unforgettable evening. Reserve your spot now at giveshelter.org/Toto. Today on CityCast Madison. Madison needs more housing, and fast. In the next 25 years, our city is projected to grow by an additional 115,000 people. That's around a 40% jump from our 2020 population. The city recently announced an update to their plans on how to boost housing options. We sat down with the mayor of Madison, Satya Rhodes Conway, to learn more about their next steps. It's Tuesday, February 25th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Hello, Mayor.
Hello, Bianca.
So, there's no two ways around it. Our city is in a housing crisis. Madison has had one of the lowest rental vacancy rates in the country for a decade. Knowing that, is it go time? Time to build more?
Yeah, I mean, it's been go time for years, Bianca.
I know. I just want to hear you say it's time for building. Well, obviously, this didn't happen overnight. So if you could, can you kind of give us the 20,000-foot view? How did we get here? How did we get into a crisis?
The absolute simplest answer to that question is we are where we are in the housing market because for too many years, we built fewer homes than there were families moving to Madison. And so we got behind population growth. And, that's for a lot of reasons. We weren't at crisis levels. We didn't really see it coming. There was the whole housing crash, and who knew that actually building housing was going to be a thing that we had to take on. So it's complicated, but the short version really is that our construction hasn't kept up with our population growth. The other thing is Madison's a great place to live. And so between our quality of life and our strong economy, we are seeing more people move here, like specifically for jobs, which puts pressure on a certain segment of the market, which then impacts the whole rest of the housing market.
Yeah. And I know plenty of folks who are listening right now have recently moved here. That's a good portion of folks who are listening to us.
And welcome, by the way.
Yes. And welcome. Welcome from the mayor. And also we're in one of these areas that has been identified as not an issue for climate change crisis. Of course, nowhere is perfect, but we're really a desirable place to be for sure. We're here to talk solutions. You recently released a progress report on the city's Housing Forward initiative. For those who aren't familiar, that's a city plan that was launched in 2021 to address issues of housing in Madison, from housing options, affordable housing, segregation, displacement of older adults, and homelessness. So, Mayor, can you give us a little background on the Housing Forward initiative and some of its impacts so far?
Yeah, absolutely. We launched Housing Forward because one of the things that I ran on when I got elected in 2019 was to work on housing and affordable housing in particular. And that was because I'm a student of cities. I've worked on city policy for a long time, and I saw this pattern in other cities of the failure to keep up with the economy and with population growth. Cities were not building enough housing, and their housing was getting way more expensive, and people were getting displaced. And I started to see that trend happening in Madison, and I wanted us to get ahead of it. Now, we didn't quite get ahead of it, but at least we did start working on it. And that was really the impetus for Housing Forward, was to really take the issue of housing seriously in Madison and to make sure that we were working on all of the different aspects of it. And so we have made some progress. We've done a lot of work in the sort of rules that govern housing and the production of housing. So we created a new transient-oriented development overlay zoning so that places that have good access to frequent transit can actually have more homes built near that transit to make life easier for folks. We have leveraged, I think it's over 200 million in tax credits for affordable housing now. And, when we support the production of affordable housing, we support it close to high frequency transit. So again, we're trying to help people's lives be a little bit easier. We've supported the development of just over 2,500 homes through our Affordable Housing Fund. And that Affordable Housing Fund has more than tripled in the time that I've been in office. So we are increasing our commitment there. We've really looked at land banking around the city so that we can control property and then make sure that the housing that's built there is affordable to try and help prevent displacement from neighborhoods and increase people's choices in where they can live. We have ownership work as well. We've provided over $5 million in down payment assistance for people to own their first home. And we're experimenting with our own projects of developing housing. We're building some townhomes to see how can we get to make it easier to build townhomes in Madison. We have a number of projects where we're building affordable housing ourselves for our Community Development Authority to manage. And we're looking at, can we experiment with building condominiums so we can understand what the barriers to that is in Madison?
The city specifically taking that on.
Yeah, we're taking that on through the Community Development Authority because we are not seeing the production of condominiums. And we think that they're a potential really good solution for first-time home buyers. I think mostly the barriers are at the state and federal level. We want to see if there's any way to get around them. And the best way to do that is to do it ourselves. So anyway, lots of work. We also do loans for property tax assistance for older adults and folks on fixed incomes. We do loans for home repair. And then during the course of the pandemic, we actually supported over 10,000 households with rental assistance and eviction defense funding to help keep people in their homes during the pandemic. And that was obviously supported with federal money, but was really, really important work for our community.
Yeah, there's so much that was charted.
Sorry, it's a very long list. I get very excited about housing.
No, please don't say sorry because, I was just going to say, and necessarily so, and I looked at the 2021 strides that you all made, and then you just recently released an update with just as many, if not more, further investments and initiative plans around housing. So, you're just laying out some of the stuff that's already been accomplished. And in this latest announcement, the update to the housing initiative, it sounds like the city set a lofty goal of creating 15,000 new homes by 2030, with at least a quarter being affordable housing. Can you talk about how realistic is that as a goal?
It's definitely a stretch goal. So recently, Dane County went through their housing planning process, and that is the goal that they had for Madison. So they took a regional look at our housing needs and tried to apportion by municipality how much we need to produce. And so that our goal is in line with their goal. It matches very much what we were thinking. It's a little higher, but it's very close. And so, yeah, it's ambitious, but it also, if we really want to have a healthy housing market, if we really want to have a rental vacancy rate that shifts the balance of power back to tenants and starts to moderate rent increases, we really do need to produce that many homes. And we're making progress. We have a new housing tracker where people can actually go and see the progress that we're making. And I'm looking at it right now. Since the beginning of the year, we have 105 homes have been completed, and we have over 4,000 that are in construction.
So it's underway and you can go see it. Data-driven.
Yep.
Yeah. Just to your point that you made a moment ago, a lot of power is with the landlords right now when the supply is low. That's what you're kind of pointing out. So shifting the power back to tenants, the only way to do that is to have more supply. And I wanted to note, too, that in terms of the affordable housing, the quarter goal, you're looking to having long-term affordability at below market rates for those making 60% of the area medium income or less.
Yeah, no, that's right. And it is important. I mean, because people have a thought, like when you say affordable housing, people have a thought about what that is. And actually, the sort of strict definition of affordable housing is a home is affordable to you if you are paying no more than 30% of your income to live there in mortgage or rent, right? And so homes of many different prices could be considered affordable depending on who you're talking about. And so the way that we think about affordability is we think about how much income a person is making and then what 30% of that income is and what that means that the housing should cost. And so we talk a lot about people who are at 60% AMI, which is area median income, or 30% of the area median income. So that means they are making, their area median income is a certain amount, they're making 30% of that, and then 30% of that is what they should be paying for housing.
That's good to lay out because it depends on where you're standing, right?
Yeah. But we broadly think about like creating housing that is affordable for folks who are at very low incomes and creating housing for folks that are at, sort of the median income or the average income, and then creating housing for folks that are on the higher end of the income scale. And mostly the market will produce housing that is affordable for folks that are at higher incomes. What's not happening right now is the market's not producing opportunities for first-time homebuyers. And that actually reverberates throughout the market because it means that people who are currently renting but would like to own aren't leaving those apartments, which means that those apartments are not then available to people at lower incomes. The market's a little jammed up right now because the cost of construction and labor is so high. We can't produce homes that are affordable to first-time homebuyers. I'm sorry, Bianca, I just got really geeky on you.
No, I loved it. And honestly, just to share this fact too, the median renter living in Madison has an income around $46,151. So, when you look at the median versus we also have people with, a lot to use in the market. So it's good to actually have that and that you're looking for affordability for everyone and seeing that broader picture.
To take us back out to the higher level, Bianca, the goal is that everybody has a choice of where to live that is affordable to them, right? And so to accomplish that, we have to produce all different kinds of homes, from tiny backyard cottages to big single-family houses to duplexes to triplexes to 10-story apartment buildings and everything in between, because we want both to have some place where everybody can afford to live, right? Regardless of what their income is.
Right.
And we want everybody to be able to choose. So there's not just one place, but like you could live in multiple neighborhoods.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
I want to really quickly touch on displacement because I know we touched on that briefly. And that's obviously a huge concern when rents are rising and housing prices are going up. What is the city's latest thinking on that pressure and addressing it, particularly for vulnerable residents in, the historically underinvested neighborhoods?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real challenge in our market right now because prices are so high and increasing, and people are absolutely being displaced by the market. And that is sad and wrong, frankly. In terms of how we're trying to work on that, so one thing I've already talked about is we are trying to make sure that particularly in neighborhoods that have traditionally been more affordable, that the city itself is acquiring property so that we can make sure that there is affordable housing constructed there for the people that live there, should they want to move into it. And just to make sure that we're preserving options in neighborhoods.
And does that happen by you, the city, kind of making the deals with people who are ready to play ball and have affordable housing included? Because obviously you can't control how property owners are going to price their units,
Right. So, yes, let me come back to that, though, because I want to say a couple other things in terms of how we think about displacement. One of the things that we do try and focus on is helping to keep people in their homes. And so whether that is through rental assistance or Section 8 or giving people loans to help do rehab projects on their properties that they might not otherwise be able to afford. One thing that you can get a loan for example, is if you have mobility issues, to put in a ramp or another accessibility feature for your home so you can stay in it, but also just like fixing it up so you can continue to afford to stay there. We also do, as I said, have loans for seniors to help cover the cost of their property taxes. We really do try and do what we can to help particularly lower income households be able to stay where they are and to not feel like they have to move. The other piece of it is doing what we can on providing first-time homebuyers the opportunity to get into an ownership situation, whether that is through your sort of traditional buying a single-family home or into perhaps co-housing or a co-op or a land trust model. There's lots of options on how you could start to build some equity and have at least an ownership stake, if not full ownership. And that's difficult because of the supply, but it is something that we feel like is very important, particularly to allow people to stay in the neighborhoods that they want to be in. So there's way more to do, and there's some ways in which we just can't prevent displacement. But a lot of the reason that I focus on having housing choice is because I want people to be able to stay in the neighborhood that they want to be in. And in order to do that, we have to create this supply that allows them to do that. But now I want to go back to your question on when we acquire a property in a neighborhood where we want there to be affordable housing, how does that work? And so there's two ways that we support affordable housing. One is an affordable housing developer will come to us and say, we want to build this affordable housing complex here, or this mixed income complex here. Is much more often. It's usually not all affordable. And we would like you to support it. And we're also going to go ask the state for tax credits, and we're going to ask the county to support it. And we're going to, all these things. And so we then evaluate those proposals and decide whether or not we're going to fund them out of our affordable housing fund.
Okay, got it.
And so that's one way that it happens. The other way that it happens is that we watch the market. And when their properties come available in places that we feel like we want to make sure that we're protecting the option for affordable housing, we will buy those. And we will almost always, we're buying that at market rate. And then we will turn that around and we will develop it ourselves through the Community Development Authority, or more commonly, we will put out an RFP, a request for proposals, and to the development community, and evaluate the different proposals we get and choose the one that we think is best. But in that request for proposals, we're going to say, you have to come in with a certain amount of affordability, or we're looking to target this particular level of income, or we want this feature in it, and so then they would bring that back in their proposal to us.
They're going to come correct.
Right. They're gonna give us what we want, right?
Yeah.
And often they will say, well, we'll give you what you want, but you can't charge us full price for the land. Right. Or we're going to give you what you want, but you need to give us money from the Affordable Housing Fund. Or, so there's a deal that gets done there. But we have more control over it because we own the land.
I really like the idea and the topic of the folks that already live here in Madison being able to stay in the neighborhoods they're in, right? So we're talking about displacement. I do want to kind of switch gears to talk about codes and zoning rules. And, back in 2023, one of the things, the city changed the definition of a family to allow more unrelated people to live together as renters. So that's one thing. More recently, earlier this month, you and a group of city alders introduced a package of changes to city zoning ordinances that would increase the flexibility and how property owners can place housing on their land. And I understand that is a big thing for seniors in terms of being able to stay in their neighborhood. So can you talk about what those changes were around that flexibility and what you can do with the space that you have?
Yeah. So the proposal that's before the city council right now, it sort of really focuses on two things. On the one hand, there's an ordinance change that would make it easier if, say, someone owns a property and wants to tear down the existing home because it's in bad shape and put up a duplex or, whatever might be allowed, or even just replace a single family home. And it's not a historic home and it's not a historic neighborhood and it's just a dump.
Yeah, it's time for some upgrade.
It's time for an upgrade. And so we're just trying to make it easier to do that. And so that's one piece. The other piece is two categories. One is a category of changes that would make it easier to build what we affectionately call ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We're talking about your backyard cottage or your granny flat. It's not a full duplex situation, but there's a single family home and then there's another unit. For a long time, folks in Madison have wanted to see more production of these because honestly, it could be a great option, right? It could be you living in your house and you're renting out the backyard cottage to a grad student, or maybe you're downsizing and you live in the backyard cottage and you rent out the main house, or maybe your kids are living in the house and you are living in the backyard cottage. And there's all sorts of different configurations that you can imagine really working for people and helping, their household budgets.
Yeah. I know a number of people who have huge yards, and people are thinking about doing this explicitly. So for sure.
Yeah. So we're trying to make it easier. It has been complicated. It is expensive. In large part, just, the cost of materials and labor in construction is a lot right now. But we're trying to make it easier from an approvals point of view so that more people could maybe do it and that it might be easier for it to make sense financially. So there's a set of things there. The other set of things is honestly kind of super geeky stuff that our zoning staff, when people come in and say, just for example, I want to build a side porch on my house and I want to do it in this way and here's my plan and it's going to be so cool. And the zoning staff have to say, I can't let you do that because it doesn't meet the setback requirement for side porches, which is they have to be more setback than front porches. Why?
Right. A lot of rules.
Right. And the zoning staff, so they have this list of things that it doesn't make sense to them. Why do I have to say no to this? It's not a big impact. It's a sort of silly regulation. And so they've gone through and we're just giving folks a little flexibility on porches, on garages, on the placement of the building on the lot, so that we don't have to say no when we really feel like we should be able to say yes.
What we're broadly talking about is adding density to people's lots, and we want to talk about density in general in the city. You've repeatedly said that all areas of the city need to be open to building more. And that's a hot topic, controversial to some. We've seen pushback on multiple occasions from residents across town opposed to moves that the city has proposed, for example, proactive zoning. What do you say to residents who are fighting to, save the integrity of their neighborhoods when they're pushing back on this idea of adding more density?
I'd say two things. And first of all, Growth and change are inevitable, right? Our city is growing and changing. And we there's no option to stop that. So the choice that we have is whether we want to manage that effectively or we want to have the change just happen to us without us effectively managing it. In this case, really the choice is, are we willing to accept more homes in our neighborhoods and in our city, or are we okay with more and more people being displaced from our city because it gets more and more expensive? And being a city where, folks that work at a coffee shop or are firefighters or nurses can't afford to live. And personally, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with Madison being a place where only rich people can live.
It wouldn't be the same.
It wouldn't be the same. And it's also just patently not fair, right? Like, most of the people who live in Madison weren't born here, didn't grow up here. We all moved here at some point, right? And so we had the opportunity to find an apartment that we could afford. And then many of us, the opportunity to find a house that we could afford to buy and live in, right? And to say that the people who come after us shouldn't have that same opportunity, just that feels really deeply unfair to me. And I don't think that's who we are as a community, right? I think we're a welcoming community. I think we want people to be here. I think we want our kids to be able to stay here if they want to. And I think we want our parents and our grandparents to be able to downsize once they're empty nesters, right? And so all of that means that we have to have more choices in housing. So that's the one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is that accepting more density in our neighborhoods does not ruin their character in any way. I live in a neighborhood which I think most people would consider a traditional, quote, single-family home neighborhood on the near north side. And I actually did this recently. I walked around and I looked at, and so on my block face, it is all single-family homes. But on the next block, immediately across the street from me, is a rental home. And then you go, I think, 3 or 4 buildings down, and there's 3 duplexes in a row. And if you go around the corner, there's a triplex, right? And all of that feels like a traditional neighborhood, right? So you can have gentle density in a neighborhood. You can have duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, backyard cottages, additional units without changing the feel of the neighborhood really at all.
Mm-hmm. That's also, by the way, my new favorite term, gentle density.
Right. So
after diving in.
And so you think about even the most sort of traditional single family home neighborhood could accept more gentle density. And then take it a step further and think about, like, well, what about near, the little neighborhood business district? Would it be okay to have 2 or 3 story buildings there, right? Would it be okay to have, like you do on State Street, would it be okay to have shops on the first floor and 1 or 2 or 3 or more stories above of housing? And would it be okay to have some places where we had townhomes, which is a very traditional building form in other cities? Madison doesn't have a lot of them, but that's not a new idea. So it really is about thinking about what level of density is appropriate for the place.
And all of these different townhouses, duplexes, triplexes, these are the examples, if folks are following this discussion about housing, of the missing middle that they might keep hearing about, the missing middle house options, that there's something in between single family home and renting. And that's just what you laid out perfectly. And I wanted to ask, how are you thinking about getting people to take up the option to maybe make that change?
I mean, this gets back to your initial question, because a lot of what is allowed to be built is controlled by our zoning code. And so the work that we've done to make it a little more expansive, create a few more options in the zoning code, have more places where you could just by right build a duplex or a triplex or a townhome, and to have more places on higher volume streets or near higher frequency transit where you could build, 5, 6, 7, 8 stories more easily. That's all the zoning code, right? So the work that we're doing through the zoning code is to try and have a better fit between what we need and what could be comfortable in a neighborhood, could be the appropriate level of density for a neighborhood, and the sort of other things that impact that density, which largely have to do with transportation infrastructure, right? Because you do want to make sure that you have the transportation infrastructure to support the density. And I think we're all just more comfortable with, on, say, a street like East Washington, having an 8 or 10 or 12-story building.
Yeah, it already has, the transportation set up. I wanted to flag, too, the missing middle housing options are, in part, it's about affordability and, who can access it. And while we're talking about transportation, I did want to bring something up. Some of the people who'd likely fall into the category of needing missing middle housing options are city workers themselves. So recently, Madison Metro has experienced some disruptions to service due to drivers not showing up for work, upset over contract negotiations. The bus rapid transit system is a core part of the city housing vision. As you mentioned, the city put out a statement in response to the situation and noted that, quote, some of the public statements that have been made regarding the reason for these disruptions contain inaccurate and misleading information. Can you share anything about what exactly was inaccurate or misleading about what's going on with the buses and mechanics?
I'm sorry, I really can't, Bianca, because that would be violating the confidentiality of the bargaining table. And although the other side has clearly already done that, I'm not willing to. Mm-hmm.
So can you say anything about expected delays, if any of this is going to be addressed?
It's entirely, that is not within the city's control. We certainly expect our employees to come to work and do their jobs. And we are bargaining in good faith.
Okay, well, we certainly, we just wanted to bring it up because we know that we saw that as an issue. And as you said, having an efficient, effective transportation system is going to be very key for this housing initiative to come through. So I appreciate you taking the time. Mayor Satya Rhodes-Conway, thank you so much for taking the time to give us this update on the housing initiative.
Thank you, Bianca. It's been a pleasure.
That's the mayor of Madison, Satya Rhodes-Conway, on the latest with the city's Housing Forward initiative and their steps to address our housing crisis. If you'd like to learn more about the city's plans or their new housing tracker, head to our show notes for a link. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with one of your neighbors? Maybe the one who has a really big backyard. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take the best care.